Hey guys, welcome to The Bottom Half is Red. I'm your host, Barron Longstrath, and I am excited to bring to you a show that is going to give you some thought-provoking discussions. It's going to give you some expert insights to both encourage and some practical steps for how to build an organization that can more effectively introduce the world to Jesus Christ. So what is The Bottom Half is Red? It's all about building a culture of excellence. It's about growing your unique and creative identity. And it's about carrying out the will of God at any cost. So you're going to see that through practical teaching tips, developing a culture of giving, creating branding and marketing, or even methods to help guests feel safe and welcomed. This podcast is going to have you covered. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to take just a moment and extend a special invitation to all of our dedicated listeners. If you're looking to get even more involved in our community and gain some access to some behind-the-scenes stuff, become a Patreon supporter. And you can find that link in the episode description or even on Patreon. Just visit The Bottom Half is Red. Listen, we can't wait to welcome you on board and to share this exciting journey. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome again to The Bottom Half is Red. I'm your host, once again, Barron Longstrath. My executive producer is looking at me, and he's loving the way that I'm introducing this podcast today. I appreciate our audience. Thank you so much for being with us. We've heard so many comments about how this is affecting your day, your life, you're thinking differently, and we appreciate you commenting, appreciate all the questions that are coming in, and I appreciate sitting across the table from the Church Today's executive pastor, Rustin Young. Welcome to the show, Rustin. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and I am very, very excited to be here.
Rustin, if you don't know him, he is a very, very educated man, and he would probably not say he was, but he really, really is. He is a graduate from Indiana Bible College. He has essentially worked his way through, and I want you to take a moment because I am not going to get the details right on that, but you are in the financial scope of the industry. Now tell us a little bit about that, a little bit about yourself. Recently a new father, which is a just awesome, exciting part of life. You probably haven't slept in a few weeks. You could tell us all about that. But tell us about who you are, where you come from, so that our audience becomes a little bit more acquainted with who you are, Rustin.
All right. So grew up in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. I graduated from Morris High School in 2012, and I think it was about a year before I graduated where I first came to your church and continued to go. It was through a friend of mine who's the band leader now at the church. He invited me. I came, continued to come, was baptized, was born again, and then the journey began, so to speak. So I graduated in 2012. I'm a high school graduate. I don't know what the world has to offer. Don't know anything. So I just go straight to work. I worked construction for a little bit. I was handy with welding. I knew how to do it basically. So I got a job as a pipe welder. I worked my way up from there. And then in 2015, I felt the urge to go to IBC to see what it was about.
And that's Indiana Bible College.
That's Indiana Bible College, for everyone listening. Great school. I'm a big fan of Bible college. So I basically quit my job. I moved to Indianapolis, a city I've never been before. And I was only going to go there for 1 year to try it out, which is something very common. But after going for 1 year and just learning what I did, I realized I've got to stick this thing out. I've got to go all the way. And so I essentially worked my way through college, and I graduate there with honors. And one thing that showed me was not just what Bible college can teach you, but you can learn things. That's something I never really thought about myself. I realized at college that I could learn things, and so that's what I did. So I graduate, I go back to welding because sadly with my degree, it's not an accredited degree, and so the secular world isn't really looking for something like that. So I go back to my trade in welding, and I got certified in securities, which is Series 7 and 66. Those are investments. And I got my life and health insurance license, and this is a few years later. And now I'm working full-time in the investments and insurance industry as a financial advisor. It's a fully remote job. And that whole time from out of Bible college, I'm youth pastoring at Brother Longstreth's church, and me and my wife are just kind of doing that, and then we become the executive pastors earlier this year, and that's pretty much where we are now. And we just had our first daughter September 15th. She is
beautiful,
a handful, beautiful, very loud.
Which is the way you want a daughter to be.
Full of personality, full of attitude, but when she's just looking at you straight face calmly, it's just you forget about everything else.
And I love the fact that you said straight face calmly.
Yeah. When she's calm, you take note of those moments.
Yes.
As a parent.
You capitalize on those moments. She's beautiful. I appreciate the explanation of the journey, because I feel like this is important for the subject matter we're going to discuss here. And in this episode, we're going to really bounce back and forth. And we're going to talk about something that everybody's talked about, everybody's talking about. It doesn't take a lot of Google searches to, define in various ways what leadership is all about. And really today, on the bottom half is red, we're tackling something that is, I think, a subject matter that somebody is ever learning in. We're discovering new ways, we're reading new authors, there's different perspectives, and we're just dealing with really trying to define leadership. And so not, I don't know if conclusive would be the right word, but I don't believe that we can just walk away from a table and say, we're done. Like, let's put a pin in it, send it out there, and I think this is definable for the remainder of time. I think this is something that we're ever learning. And
right.
And when you took us on a journey here a second ago, you took us through the early stages of entering into our church, the early stages of life, ever learning, going to higher education. And I'll compliment you. I have met people, peers of yours, that know that you are with us still. I mean, you're a product of this church in that regard, and know that you're here serving. And I have met them just through travels, and they would say, "Oh yeah, Rustin, man, love that dude. Man, one thing about him is he took everything so serious." And we'd all be out messing around, and he'd be back in the room, prepping for the next class. Or if you wanted to find Rusty, you had to go down to the local coffee shop or Starbucks or whatever, and he'd be reading a book. And so that, to me now, how long have you been out of college now?
It'll be 4 years.
Yeah. So 4 years later, I'm looking across the table from you, and I realized I saw your growth. You'd come back, and I'm like, man, not just in biblical studies, but just growth in general. Characteristics that I would see, like, man, he's getting sharp. Not that you weren't, but you see that, and that's a positive thing for.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And but in all seriousness, I sit across the table from you, and I'm highly impressed by you. And if that means anything, it means anything. But I am highly impressed, and it is a privilege to be able to talk about this kind of subject matter with somebody that I have essentially, I feel like, put a lot in. And so your perspective on leadership is very valued to me, and I feel like it'll be valued to our audience. So let's dive in. Here he's known as Pastor Rustin. So if I do say, "Hey, Pastor Rustin," it's because that's what I'm accustomed to calling him. But both him and his wife, they're to say that they're instrumental in this church would be an understatement. So, but we appreciate your leadership, and I think that your perspective here and your wit, which I have told Dave about, like one of the quickest. Now here's a note. If you ever meet him, do not, and I warn you, do not get in any type of a verbal battle with Rustin Young. You will walk away whipped. And he's laughing over there, but he knows it's true. Bro can throw down in a quick second. So, and I have been the recipient of his respect, and I appreciate that. But I'm assuming that he has cut me in half 7 times. No, he's shaking his head no.
No way.
Rustin, tell us, and from your perspective, and you are a well-versed man as well as an avid student. Like you stay in that student mindset. All right. So Rustin, in your opinion, help us understand what the very basic definition, what is leadership?
Okay. Again, I do not pretend to be an expert leader, but I really like what one of our apostolic authors on leadership said. Leadership is having a clear definition of what success is, not just an idea of success, but a leader has a vision, a destination. And so I think in my experience, I've always seen leaders as having a destination, not only that they see worth getting to for themselves, but seeing it being worthwhile for other people to get to as well. They're inviting people on this journey, this vision, this overarching purpose, if you will. They know a destination and they're inviting others to come along, and they see the value for other people in reaching that destination, even if those other people can't see it themselves. I think that you have to have structure in place, but I think what separates leadership from just management is it's very people-centered. I want this for you. It's not just a task, right? I want us to get there.
Together.
Yeah. Right. It's so very people-centered. I personally believe leadership is no different from discipleship, really.
Wow. Expound on that.
Well, because I initially had a hunger for learning because I viewed you as someone who was learning, as an ever learner, right? We never know everything. There's always something to progress to. And I think that true leadership is never satisfied. Real leaders, they ask good questions. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, great. David's looking at me like, thank God we have David, the real leader, in here. No, expound on that.
Well, I remember had to throw that in there.
That's right.
I think that leaders know how to ask the right questions.
That's good.
And they surround themselves with the right people. I, for one, feel like I don't have any solutions, but if I can be informed, if I can ask the right questions, then we can get there, right? We can get towards that vision. But there has to be a destination. We can't just do it for the sake of knowing more. It's like we're headed somewhere. We have to attach ourselves to a vision, and that, to me, is what leadership is.
Yeah, I think the beauty of what you're saying is in the realm of church leadership, it doesn't matter what level you find yourself on, okay? So I can speak from multiple seats because I've sat in them, okay? I have the privilege now of pastoring multiple churches at the same time. And so we have a leader, a campus pastor at our secondary location. But as a main pastor, it has taken me a while in leadership to get to that position, okay? So I've sat in chairs like you're sitting now. I've sat in chairs of no position, to position, higher position, but it doesn't matter. You have to have vision.
Right.
Okay, so there has to be vision. Now, hopefully, that vision is centered around, especially if you're not in that lead chair, that vision is centered around the higher vision that has been successfully cast. Where are we going?
Right.
Okay, so as a positional leader within a church, it could be anything from toddler base to executive pastor, wherever in between that, we can fill in the gap there. But who gave the vision, where the vision come from, right? So there's the vision. And then, so that vision has been successfully placed into your hands, Rustin. So I'm telling you, right, as a lead pastor of the church today, I'm saying in 2023, like, I want our church in action. So we still do some old school stuff, like have a theme for a year, and we rally around that, and we've built a lot off of that theme. And we feel like that theme has come from the Lord passing down. So I'm saying, Rustin, I need you to help me get our church in action. And you as a leader would say, or with great leadership, you would say, in your own words, where do you want to go first? Or why are we doing this? Whatever that, right. But the right question. So that's what you're saying. Essentially, here's vision.
Right. Now
you have vision, okay? And now you're going to start asking questions.
Right.
Right. And then even deeper questions, like, how does this connect to my position, or how can I properly? Is that exactly essentially what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So if you wouldn't mind, from your chair, like I've just laid out a scenario from your chair, like present, because we're going to have all different types of leaders. From your chair, what types of questions? Like if I said, Rustin, go, like that's our vision for 2024, quote unquote. I need you to help get our church into action. What questions would come to your mind in your seat?
Well, the first thing would be, what position am I in?
Okay.
What resources do I have available? What level of influence do I have? And essentially, what needs to happen first? Let's lay out a series of steps and take baby steps towards getting there. Like, I think my favorite story of leadership development is probably the story of Moses, because Moses he didn't set out to be a leader right off the bat. He didn't set out to be in charge of everything. He saw something no one else was seeing at the time. And that's the person that he's the one that God talked to. And the whole time it was about getting Israel to the land of milk and honey. That's the vision. That's the destination. Moses had the destination. Well, how do we do that? The Lord says, here are the steps. I need you to go talk to Pharaoh, and I'll handle it. But I need you to do this. And so the questions I'm asking are, what do I need to do? How can I help? And in this position, I think that that's really my role, as how can I help the departments get closer to that vision, whether it's the reach department. Okay, well, what events do we have this year? How are we getting out there and reaching? How are we making that come to pass? And just, I try not to be afraid of asking dumb questions, because at the end of the day, if I don't know it, it's not going to profit me to look good, right? It's not going to profit me to look like I have all the answers if we're not moving towards that vision.
Right.
So I'm going to ask the dumb questions. I'm going to ask whatever I need to know. I want to be up to speed, because then I'm useful. I can help us get towards that vision. What do I need to do?
That's a great point. Like, it may seem dumb and it may seem childish. And sometimes I bring somebody into an office setting, and we sit down and we're trying to, look forward to what let's call it 2024. And we're looking forward to 2024, and we're sitting down together. And I feel like some of the things that I'm bringing to the attention is really, really, it's very novice, right? But it helps me as a leader, right? So right. I'm being serviced here by asking you very quote unquote childish or novice questions, and it's helping me as a leader. So it may appear dumb, like right. I might think, well, we probably are past this element here, but it's better connecting me to the individual.
Right.
And now you're taking me, like essentially I want somebody to take me on a journey. Like you take me, here's your vision, right? Here's your department, here's your vision, here's why you're a leader. Now you take me, you lead me on how you're going to get let's call it the reach department, because that's what we're talking about. How are you going to get this church better connected? So lead me there, right? So yeah, I might be asking some silly questions, but I mean, if I'm being taken on a journey, right, then I feel like we're heading in the right direction. You made a statement earlier in talking about Moses. I'd like to look into. Let's like unpack that just a hair, and I think it leads into the second question. But you said that Moses doesn't necessarily set out, right? He doesn't understand exactly what 40 years looks like. He doesn't set out building 40 years.
Right.
He does not have the structure for that. He doesn't, has no idea. In fact, he starts off with, and I love this, he starts off with a vision. Go tell my people, right? Go tell them. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to approach Pharaoh and you're going to tell them, let my people. So here's your vision. Like, get my people out of Egypt. There's your vision.
Right.
And what you said is so, I mean, it got my brain. I'm like, my brain's just moving. Who do I say sent me? I mean, that's the first thing he does is starts asking questions.
Right.
Right. Like, if I'm going to do this, who am I going to say sent me?
Right.
Like, you tell me, like, who sent, and then he starts saying things like, well, we'll call it slow to speech or whatever. And, how am I going to be able to properly communicate? Well, listen, your brother's on the way, right? Or Aaron's on the way.
Right.
And he'll move with you. Like he'll move with you. And so if we're looking at all of this, we can say something like this. Can anybody be a leader? If Moses is, I got some thoughts, but I want to hear what your thoughts on this.
Okay.
Can anybody, I mean, if we're using Moses as an example, and the guy is saying, Moses is essentially he's a quitter, right? He loses his temper.
Yeah.
Right? He's off mission. Like, God literally puts him in the sweet spot and he's off mission. We can say that ultimately was the will of God, but I mean, he took a man's life.
Right.
And then he hit it, and then he can't take the heat. And so then he leaves, and then like he's out in the wilderness now. I mean, he's way off course, and yet God says, that's exactly the man I want.
Right.
So answer that in your own way. What does it take to be a leader, or can anybody be a leader?
Not only do I think that, and this is my opinion, but not only do I think anyone could be a leader, but I think that is the goal for us to strive for, is developing leadership qualities within us to be leaders in our own way. It's called Leading Even When You're Not in Charge, which is a great book.
It is a great book.
But it's about whatever position you're in, you take ownership of that position because you realize that the picture is bigger than yourself and you're there to do your part. So you are taking ownership of this thing, right? Leadership. And yes, so now let me qualify. I do not think that any mindset is conducive for leadership.
That's a great point.
I do not think that there are certain habits that you can continue to keep when it comes to being an effective leader. I think charisma and personality only carry you so far, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to develop yourself into something, right? You're going to have to develop some qualities, some skills, some attributes. Do I think that anyone could be a leader? Yes, I think the opportunity for growth is there, but you got to be willing to pick up the burden. And I think that you can do that if you attach yourself to the vision, right? I think you can. If you buy into the vision, if you see the worth, right, then you can pick up whatever load you need to, because it's not about you or this, it's about getting there.
Yeah. I think this affects us, Rustin, in day-to-day life, because we think leadership in terms of position, like positional authority. And everyone's heard it. I think it's still applicable. John Maxwell's take on leadership is about influence, right? So if you feel like that you are a leader, most likely you are in a position or a place where you are influencing somebody. So, and I'm not here to try to dissect that out. I'm simply saying there is a certain part of influence that is that is expected within a leader. Like, you are influencing, you're leading. If you're influencing positive or negatively, you're leading, right? So I love that basic definition. Now, we could talk about key leadership in church. We could talk about vision being passed down, but how many of us push to be developed or to develop a relationship. And then all of a sudden we go and stand before a preacher or whatever, and we quote unquote tie a knot. And now I am, as a man, I am supposed to be leading my family.
Right.
Okay. So
exactly.
So now I'm qualified to lead my family because I have said I do. And yet, once that takes place, what happens when I stop performing? I stop educating myself. I stop preparing. I stop asking questions. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so one of the most important elements, or one of the most important places in your life, we just quit, right? We just stop. We don't have anything in motion. We don't have anything. We're not pushing for anything, and we expect that.
Right.
Right? And so there are places, I think, in life that if we're not careful, I mean, leadership is not just about how can I move up in a company.
Exactly.
What about a father? A father needs to ask himself questions. A father needs to sit down from time to time and evaluate, am I leading my family properly? So yeah, leadership is something that we've all heard about, and there are things I feel like that we do fantastic. Okay, I'll take this. I've said this in 2 or 3 podcasts, and I'm saying this again for those of you out there that have not been a faithful listener to The Bottom Half is Red.
Uh-oh.
But Joseph's dream started in his home and ended in his home. It started and it ended. Now, different homes, but it started in the house and it ended in the house. And so if Joseph is not taking care of the homestead, he's not managing, like you said just a few minutes ago, he's not managing himself, he's not growing himself. He's positionally all right, he's whatever, but he's not managing himself. I think that anybody possesses the ability to be a leader.
The potential.
Yeah, it's there. But what gets me is we stop in some of the most important areas in leading. We arrive at places of leadership and we stop. We stop growing. We stop developing. There's information out there. I'm telling you, just Google leadership. It's just vast.
Right.
It's extensive. Everybody wants a piece of that. Everybody wants a different take on that. But to me, it's not about how much you know about it. Yes, I believe anybody, and I love what you said just a second ago. I believe anybody can be. I believe that there are various forms and ways that you should be. The problem I see is that along the way, these key qualities or traits of a leader that we're supposed to have, we just stop. We stop operating. We stop growing in those. We're no longer a student. Am I making any sense here?
Yeah.
Like we're no longer a student in that. So what are some key qualities? Like now we're looking in the home. Now we can look from the home all the way to the church. We can look into a business. I mean, you're wearing several hats. You're a leader of a family. You're a leader at church. You're a leader in the business realm. What qualities? Is there qualities that cross-pollinate between?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are some of those traits?
Well, first and foremost, I think that I said earlier in the podcast, having the right vision, which is the vision from God. The question is, who does God give these visions to? And if you read, it's interesting because if you read the Old Testament and you find these men that were of no esteem and God just elevates them to points of influence just by situations that he exposes them to, you find that there's a characteristic that kind of unites them. And if you could word it in a phrase, it might go something like, they were obedient to God even when it didn't profit them and maybe even cost them. You look at Moses, you look at Daniel, you look at Ezekiel, and those are the people that God can trust. He's going to talk to them. Those are the people he's going to tell things to. This is what's going to happen. This is the vision. This is the destination. Now you go tell everybody about it. And so I think an unwavering devotion and commitment to our covenant with God is essential in developing a leader. But also, I do think that there are qualities that would be good for every leader to possess. I think that you should, as you mentioned before, you're forever a student.
Yeah.
You're always learning. You never. There's a quote that I see all the time, but it's like the day that you think you know everything is the day you stop learning about something, right? And it's so we're always learning. I think that it's true that what is it? Is it leaders or readers, or is it the other way around?
I think it's both, isn't it?
It's both. Yeah.
I think it's both.
Definitely both. And there's people that say, well, I'm not a reader, but I think there's some utility in learning how to engage your mind, right? Study to show thyself approved. But we're always trying to learn. There's like this innate curiosity, I would say, in leaders, where it's like, no matter where we are or where they are, they're always looking to learn something. They're always looking to better themselves, right? It doesn't matter what it is. That's how they relax, right? Let me learn something more. Even when I go on vacation, I'm like, let me watch a YouTube video on how that works, It's just, there's a curiosity. I think about Moses when he saw the burning bush. He could have just said, oh, wow, that's crazy, and then went on about his day. But there was a curiosity there to drive him forward. He's got to figure these things out. He's got to ask questions, and that's what leaders do. They ask questions. So yeah, I think leaders should always be learning. I think you should surround yourself with people that you admire, leaders in your life. I think that you should learn how to not just challenge the status quo, but you need to learn how to be challenged in your own ideas. I think that it's not a trick, but it's a learned thing to learn how to present an idea and then have that idea challenged. Because then the reality hits you that it's not about you, it's about the big picture.
Right.
And sometimes as a leader, you're not going to have the solution, but you surround yourself with people that do, and people that are attached to the vision that you're leading. Let's say you've attached them to the vision. They may know how to get there a little bit better in this one step. And if you, as the leader, try to push that away in the corner, it's at the detriment of the journey towards the vision, towards the destination. There were many times when we were in Bible college, I was the senior class president, and I had an idea, and it was challenged, and it was met with backlash. And you know what? They were right. And I said, okay, let's do it, because this is bigger than I am. This is bigger than any of us. So it's not about me. It's about where we're going. So I think as a leader, you have to be open to other voices. You have to surround yourself with like-minded people.
And I'm sitting here and I'm looking through your statements and I'm connecting the dots, and I think our audience will as well, Rustin. So many different statements there, but I'm connecting them to figures in the Word, and I'm saying, that is a Daniel moment, and I'm like, oh, that's a Stephen moment, and I'm like, oh, that's what Peter did here, and the ability to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go back to your very last statement, the ability to be able to say, okay, I recognize that I still have to remain the chosen or the called or the positional leader here.
Yeah.
But it's not damaging my personal, right, my portfolio by surrendering to another idea that in the church realm we would call that a God idea.
Right.
Or a spirit-led idea. I could take the attention of our audience to Acts chapter 6, and they're at a place where there can't be further growth because the present leadership is bogged down with duties that realistically were under their pay grade, right?
Yeah.
And so what they did is they looked for characteristics that would be applicable to what they needed at that present time. And so it's in Acts 6, verse 3. Wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you for 7 men. And what kind of characteristics do we need? We need people that are honest.
Yeah.
And that's what was necessary there. We need people that are full of the Spirit of God.
Right.
Because that was what was necessary for that. And we need people that have wisdom. Like we need them over this business. Why? So that we can move forward. We can move on. And I think as like head leaders, key leaders, those appointed leaders over positions or whatever, we need to be able to look around us and say, there are men that could do this just as good or better. Mm-hmm. And that will give us, like the apostles were able to do, that'll give us the opportunity to focus on what only we can do. Mm-hmm. And there are things that only I can do, right? That I have to do.
Yeah.
But there are things that I can say, if I can give Rustin a little bit more authority and rope and leverage as a leader, I can give you that leverage. You can do it just as well as I can, right? Or better, and release me to do the things that I can only do. Because there are things that I will only be able to do. Right. And likewise, right? And so, such great information. If I'm trying to do my job, your job, the Reach pastor's job, so on and so forth, essentially my job is being left undone.
Right.
Because there are things that only I am able to do. And if I'm not focusing on those, I might be able to do everything minimally, but I will never maximize what I should be doing.
Right.
And we can call it insecurity. We can call it lack of trust. I mean, whatever. There's multiple reasons why that we get stuck. We can get caught in a pattern, in a holding pattern. I might not see you the way I should see you, but at the end of the day, I've got to focus on the things that only I should be doing, and I can do. Right. And I want to make sure that those things don't go undone. There's a couple things here that I like your perspective on. We talked about characteristics.
Yeah.
And I wrote down just various things that I felt like were necessary for a leader. And there's more things than there are time, right, to talk about them. Listening, awareness, foresight, stewardship, things that, from my chair, it's like, man, I look for guys that are out in the field like David was, not wasting their time complaining that their brothers are in positions on a battlefield while they're out there watching sheep.
Right.
David is making the most of his time, right? He finds himself doing something. He's like, you know what? I'm telling you right now, there is no man that picks up a sling and is able to defeat a Goliath.
Just right off nowhere.
Absolutely not. And so David said, I'm going to make the best of my time. So I think there's things that we can learn.
Yeah.
Right? We can learn along the way. But there's one thing that I came across, and let me pull it up here. There's one thing that I feel like, man, I'd sure like your opinion on, okay? I'm just lobbing this at you.
Okay.
So if it doesn't go good, we'll just cut it out. Right? It's not that
That's
your answer.
a relief.
it's not that your answer. It's that I'm just throwing something so random at you. Okay. But when we're dealing with servant leadership, and I think that has to be an episode by itself. Servant leadership needs to be an episode by itself. But when we're dealing with servant leadership, and I believe that servant leadership is the way that God intended leaders to respond.
Right.
Right. That's the way I think it should be done. But serving alongside, or serving as serving alongside, let's just put it like that. I came across this element of healing, right? And when I think of healing, I think obviously biblical, right? But a servant leader, what we're talking about, can facilitate it. That's what was stated. A servant leader has the ability to be able to facilitate healing. And here's what they mean. They create a safe and supportive environment where people are able, and this is a very difficult subject in terms of church and in terms of business, because people do not feel like that they are able to express how they feel, their issues, and to be able, to find a solution. How do we come up with a solution? Now, it's iffy because we are in a very field-driven culture. So you have to have a filter. But tell me, how can we facilitate an environment that gives healing an opportunity? Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It just really struck me. When we look at servant leadership, I can't think of a greater example than when Jesus Christ sat on the beach. Literally, he got the fish somewhere. They didn't just jump out. He purchased something, but he is literally cooking up a breakfast, and he takes the time to facilitate and reach into this emotional vulnerability of Peter when Peter is found at the beach. And he says, "Do you love me?" You know, so there's this exchange between, and this moment right here is a moment that solidifies Peter's understanding, right?
Yeah.
That I am so vital to the furtherance of this mission. So looking at that example, how important is it?
I'll try to articulate an answer worth hearing, but you mentioned kind of a safety for people to be honest and express themselves. And it seems to me that we've got to understand that as leadership in the vision, the people are forever a part of that vision. It's not, the people are never divorced from the vision. It's like they have to know where they fit in that vision. Moses looks at them, he says, "I see you with me in that land, not in Egypt." Right? We all know he couldn't go in, but that was the vision, right? But the people need to know that they're not some pawn, just being used to get to a destination, but they're a part of that vision as a whole. They're a crucial part of it. And, I think that when it comes to safety and being honest, it just takes investment in people, knowing asking people how their great-grandma's doing in the hospital. They know the situations, and if there's an intimacy there, because when people know that you care about them, they know that you're not just using them to get to a certain point.
Yeah, very transactional.
But they're a part of it, right? You're not a manager, you're a leader, and that's the guy that people are going to follow. I think it just takes time and investment. It's like that saying goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And I think that really opens the door for you to be honest with them, because they can rest assured you're looking at them in an objective way as it relates to the bigger picture. And so they'll trust your words more. They'll be like, Jesus has this conversation with Peter. It's from what I can tell, it's one-on-one, right? No one, if it wasn't, probably no one knew what they were talking about, because it was an interaction between Jesus and Peter, and Jesus didn't need to be specific because he knew once he spoke, Peter's mind would go back to that moment, and he handles it one-on-one. But do you love me, Lord? Do you love me? Lord, then feed my sheep. He reiterates the vision. It's all about the sheep.
Wow.
It's all about,
so good.
It's all about getting there, and you're in there, right? You are a part of this vision, Peter, right? So
that's so good. I can't help but think that Jesus not only knew what his disciples' feet looked like, he knew what they felt like. Mm-hmm. Like he washed them.
Yes.
That is the type of leader that Jesus was. Mm-hmm. That was the form of a servant. That was the form of that is not the leader's job. I mean, you have to think about that. That is not the leader's job to wash the filth of your past steps away. That's not your job.
Right.
And yet Jesus was saying, nobody in here is above his master. Mm-hmm. He is letting them know, like, this gets dirty. Like, you're dealing with where people have come from, right? You don't get out of that. They don't just buy into your vision and you get to escape their home life, and you don't get to escape their past, experiences that have really damaged them. You don't get to do that. When you sign on for this kind of thing, you have to be able to really facilitate that environment that we'll call a healing environment, where you're helping people work through that, because at the end of it all, they are worth it.
Yes.
And in our business, it's not about how the end of the year is facilitated. It's about who is on the journey with me. Right? Did they come along with me? Yeah, God gave me this great vision, whatever. And if I'm using people in the process to get there, if I'm using their backs in order to elevate myself, we've got an issue. And people will again, they will find themselves in a non-trusting environment, and you're going to have people that won't buy in because they don't trust you. And it's just, it's a cyclical process that is so dangerous.
Right.
What a great answer. Last question here. how do we develop some of these leadership skills? I mean, we're talking about being a great leader. We're talking about vision. How do we develop these skills?
So I really like this, and I'm quoting other people.
That's good.
None of this is original right here, I feel like. But I really like the saying, you won't rise to the level of the occasion, you will fall to the level of your habits. And you can nitpick and comb through that however you want, but what I appreciate about it is the aspect of training yourself, equipping yourself, right? And I think a lot of times we look for hype, but we don't look for being equipped a lot. But I want to make sure that I want to leave church more equipped than I was.
Yeah.
I want to go home and equip myself. I want to always be developing. What are some skills? I think that you can, I think you have to learn how to take responsibility for yourself at first. Like you said, I remember teaching youth class, and I would say all these things about the call of God, and the question would come up, what if I don't want to be in ministry? And I would ask, and this is something an instructor asked our class, and I asked the youth class, I said, well, are you going to have a family one day? Okay, then you're the minister in there, right? Like, well, I'm not going to be a minister, I'm not going to have to lead people, but are you going to have a family one day?
Right.
Okay, then yes, you will. Right. So I think you have a responsibility to develop yourself, right? You have to, I'll just be, you should develop some good qualities about yourself, like learning how to get up early, or get up, sleep the proper amount, get up at a good time, keep yourself healthy, right? Don't overindulge. Don't be a slave to your own appetites and instincts, but I'm not trying to give credence to stoicism or anything, but because we know that a relationship with God is crucial. But look at yourself in an objective way and and really measure out through prayer and through the Word of God, where are the weaknesses that I can improve on, and then look to do those. Finish projects that you start, keep your word, things like that. And so that's responsibility for yourself. I would say study the Word of God. Don't just read the Word of God, but study it. Look for the richness of the words, of the sayings, right? Of the genres of Scripture, the history, the poetry. Don't just take it for face value, but dig into the Word, because there's so much richness there that is missed because we don't want to get the shovel out and get blisters on our hands. But it's really, it's worthwhile, right? So study the Word of God. What do you want your prayer life to look like? Do you want to be in the same spot spiritually next year as you are this year? Okay, well, then get a plan together. Get some discipline together. And so yeah, work on developing yourself. Keep your priorities straight. I don't really think that there's any virtue in unnecessarily sacrificing your health for something, because, well, if you're not healthy, then you can't work, you can't serve, you can't walk towards the vision, right? I don't think there's really any virtue in that. I don't think there's any virtue in neglecting your family for something, right? It's like, that's your main ministry right there. Surround yourself with people that that you admire and would like to imitate, and strive to be a leader that you would follow, right? Who would you follow? Try to be him or her, whatever it is. I would say surround yourself with people that are not just like-minded, but surround yourself with people that have been places you haven't been, because that's going to challenge you, right? I don't want yes people around me, and I definitely don't have yes people around me, because we have some strong people, some strong men at this church, and I think that's a byproduct of your investment. But, never be above learning something from someone who, even if they don't have the credentials that you have, so surround yourself with people that can challenge you and push you forward. And lastly, I think leaders should absolutely learn how to apologize. I don't mean that you should agree with any accusation brought forth to you, but I think leaders are really called to see things as they are, and but you're never above being at fault for something. And I've had to apologize many times, and the important thing was I'm not trying to make excuses for it. I'm not trying to back my way out of it. I would just say, yeah, that was not my intention. You're valuable to me, and we're both on this journey. I'm sorry for that, right?
No, I've never lost anything with those two words.
Mm-hmm.
I have never lost anything. It has never cost me anything to say I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it was shared, like myself and another, even if it really wasn't my fault, but I'm the one holding, right? I'm holding the potato after the song quits, and it's looked in my direction. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like that has never cost me anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, my foot has gone on the accelerator of their heart, their emotions, by me being able to look them in the face and say, I am so sorry. I have gained so much through those two words. I mean, there was an account where somebody was just going in, and everything that was brought to the table, there was probably 2 or 3 things that was even questionable. Most of it had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
And I sat there while these accusations were brought, and they were leadership stuff. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. You're afraid of doing this. Da, da, da. I mean, it's, whatever. And at the end of the conversation, I just simply looked up and I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry I made you feel this way.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I didn't respond to your liking. Now, there are things that you don't know about, but I am sorry, because at the end of the day, like, I'm in the soul-saving business.
Right.
And there is not going to be a part of my flesh because I'm too proud to facilitate an atmosphere of healing. I'm not going to do it. Rustin, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast today. I heard a quote on leadership. I've let you have like 10 of them. So let me say this. Leadership is the art of dancing gracefully through a minefield. And you have allowed some music to be played today so that us leaders out there are able to dance gracefully through this minefield. Thank you so much for joining us on The Bottom Half is Red. Listen, I hope you have enjoyed your time with us today and gained something of value. If you love what you heard today, please do not forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps us. Your feedback is incredibly crucial, and we want to improve on what we're doing and to bring you the best content possible. You can find us on Facebook, look us up, Instagram, even YouTube at The Bottom Half is Red. Hey, be sure to check the episode description for any links to any resources that we have mentioned during the show. You don't want to miss out. This podcast is a production of The Church Today here in the great city of Tulsa, and the executive producer is our very own David Tandera. I hope you've had a fantastic time, and we look forward to having you with us again on our next episode of The Bottom Half is Red. We'll see you then.